Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic Show. It's episode 577. This week, folks, we haven't got a guest, but it's going to be an internal discussion between me and my great host, Stephen from Zipfish. And we're going to be discussing Stephen's long and windy road to become a WordPress developer. And also we're going to be talking about when it's at the right time to use a plugin, or you'd be better off getting something hand-coded. We're going to be discussing those two topics. It should be a great show. So before we get into the meat and potatoes, Stephen, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the new listeners and viewers?
Yeah, my name's Stephen Souter. I'm from zipfish.io. We make WordPress fast by optimizing the code that runs on your site and also the servers behind your site.
That sounds great to me. And before we go into the main part of the discussion, I was just about to say interview there, is that we've got to talk about one of our great sponsors, and that's Kinsta Hosting. Kinsta is a WordPress hosting provider. It only specializes in WordPress. If you've got a site for yourself or for a client, that's WooCommerce, a large membership site, a learning management system, anything that really needs performance and reliability, you should look at Kinsta. I personally feel they're one of the better or best hosting providers at the present moment. Go over, have a look at their plans. I'm sure you're going to be delighted with them, and I suggest that you go and buy one. If you do that, please tell them that you heard about them on the WP-Tonic Show. It helps Kinsta, and it really does support the show. Your support is much appreciated. Right, Stephen. So first of all, when did you start getting into coding? Was it the web? Was it web development, or did you start somewhere else?
I started in WordPress, actually. So probably when I was early high school or something, 1&1 had this deal where you could get like a free website and you could have WordPress installed on it. And you could like have it for a year or something. And so I got super excited about that. And of course, it was, a terrible website that ran super slow, but everybody's internet was slow back then. So kind of started playing around on that, kind of started coding some stuff up and seeing, what could I do and what could I break? And it was a lot of fun. And it kind of is what got me hooked on the web. I then kind of left web stuff and went to college, did marketing, and started my first marketing job at a startup company that was really young. There's about 4 employees total. And, we didn't have a bunch of money. We all wore a bunch of hats, and part of, marketing is web, of course. And so I started getting back into programming and started building some WordPress websites for them, and kind of just really basing that around like different marketing initiatives, right? Like landing pages, product pages, all of that stuff. And then from there, was like, hey, I like this better than the marketing side of stuff. So I'm going to get into development full time. And so really just started diving really deep into PHP and JavaScript, and got into Meteor, which is still around these days, not as cool and hyped up as it used to be. But moved out to LA for a little while, for about 4 years, and did the whole startup scene. And worked on various different projects, building things with React and Vue and Meteor, which was a fun ride. But the crazy thing is that there is so much money that gets poured into startups that end up not working, and you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars building some subscription platform or some ordering system that's super complex and involved, and then come to find out the business model doesn't work at all. And that's kind of where I started thinking back to how I used to build projects, and WordPress just offers you a lot out of the box. You can, have a whole e-commerce platform. You can have a whole subscription system. You can have complex marketing funnels and channels and advertisement campaigns, and you can link that all together with WordPress. And if you get into some place that is a little sticky, like somebody hasn't quite built out the right thing. A lot of times you can just add a hook or add a filter, add a little custom PHP, and customize whatever's happening on the page or on the back end. And you can get a lot farther, a lot faster. And so it was kind of going through all those different startups and those kind of like that whole burnout sort of phase where you invested all this time and resources into something that eventually just folded. It's just like, you know what, we could have built an MVP on WordPress and taken that to market, see if something worked, and then maybe gone back and rebuild the whole thing. Because honestly, any of the startups that got any traction were rebuilding everything from the ground up, several times over, because the model changes, the company pivots, what you thought you need, you don't need. And so building something as fast and cheap, getting it as you can, getting it to market, and then going from there, I think is a key element to business. How much value can you derive out of 1 hour worth of work or 10 hours worth of work? If you're custom coding everything, that value isn't seen till a long time later. Like, you have to have a lot of customers, you have to have a lot of users, you have to have a lot of revenue that's being generated to justify hours of a developer's time. Whereas with WordPress, right, it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot quicker, you can do a lot more.
So you're a bit of a unicorn, really. I haven't heard. Have I heard that particular path that you described in your WordPress journey? No, I haven't actually. It's unusual, somebody that kind of oscillates from marketing into the technical, starts in the technical, migrates into the marketing, and then goes back to the technical side, kind of oscillates. But on the other hand, if you're running a small agency, the reality is you have to wear a lot of hats. So that is the reality of small agency life, isn't it? So when you started with WordPress, you went the marketing, and then you went back. What were some of the resources that helped you learn WordPress and PHP then? Was it just trial and error, or was it a mixture of online resources and books?
Yeah, lots of trial and error, lots of YouTube videos, lots of random courses here or there. I feel like when you're teaching something, when you're teaching yourself a new skill, there is a lot of this, how should I say it? Like jumping too far ahead. Like, you want to do something and it's fairly complex. And so you're trying to do it and you're hitting a brick wall. And then you realize, oh, wait, I need to go back. I need to learn some of these basic things. And so you go back, you learn those basic things, and then you can go and, hit that next mile marker. And then you find out at another point, they're like, oh, wait, I don't really understand, JavaScript in depth. I don't really understand, like, why is, everything a function in JavaScript. I don't get that and what that means. And understanding that helps you debug your code and helps you figure out exactly, what's going on and how to really build, sophisticated platforms. But if you're missing these core elements and functionality, it's very difficult and hard to move fast. And so I feel like my whole coding learning career was a lot of going too far down the road, trying to build something too complex, realizing you have to go back and learn some of this stuff, and then kind of just oscillating between those two things, to get where I got today. So my course was definitely windy and weaving. It wasn't like, oh, I signed up for, some course, did the whole thing. I usually learn best by doing. So it was just me trying to do a bunch of stuff and banging my head against the wall.
So what would your advice, what would be some of your advice to somebody starting off? Because I hear a lot of people say, well, you got to start off with HTML and CSS. The only problem with CSS is A, it's not a true programming language, and B, it's a bit of hybrid, isn't it? I've known a lot of hardcore programmer types from traditional languages like C, C++, and they've tried to learn CSS, and they literally they've ended up almost pulling their hair out of their own, because they just found it's not tremendously logical, if you understand what I mean. But I suppose you do have to start with CSS and HTML. What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, really, the building blocks of the web are like HTML, and then followed by CSS, and then followed by back end stuff.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you the back end. It's got more complicated. Would you, after learning some basic HTML, CSS, so you become reasonably dangerous, would you? I think now you've got a big choice coming up. Do you delve into WordPress and PHP, or do you really aim at JavaScript and a library? Which direction would you go if you were in that person starting off in 2021?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it really depends what you're trying to build at the end of the day. Um, I like my path to like learning how to build websites and development was very much function based. There was a need. We didn't have the money to pay a developer to do it, so I just figured it out myself, on nights and weekends, and built, the company's first website. Um, that like that's a very functional way of approaching programming. Like I want to do this, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. I think like if you're saying I want to get into development as a career path, and there's not like an actual project or an actual tangible goal that you're trying to achieve, you just want to learn how to build something. Like I think study like going and finding a course and going through a course and then just looking around trying to find a job and whoever will hire you, and then just start learning from there, and see where things take you. It's a very, I think the development world is a very windy road, especially today with all the different like build scripts that are out there. Like the advent of like Node JS, like where you have, Webpack now, or like you used to, people used to use like Grunt or Gulp, and um, there's
Lovely
like this
names.
whole side of things, like just setting things up is way more complex than it used to be.
Well,
And
that is part of the pain, but also we do have a sizable decision, because and I'm not saying there's an easy answer, or if there is an answer, I actually probably think there probably is an answer, but you do have this fundamental, and the easy cop out would be to say you got to learn both, and that's a sizable thing to do. Do you like learn WordPress, the functions, the basic, um, the functions, hooks, and then you go into PHP? Because let's be frank about it, PHP ain't going anywhere, and with some of the modern PHP libraries, it's improved quite a lot as a language, hasn't it? But then you got this enormous monster, this other, JavaScript, haven't you, and React and some of the other libraries. And I just wondered, if you were in somebody's shoes, where do you think you would you still go down that WordPress, PHP? Do you think that's a easier thing to get really reasoning good and then look at JavaScript, or would you start with JavaScript and then look at PHP?
yeah, I think that's something you could debate for as long as you want to. Like, what's the
Yeah,
easiest route? What's the best route? What's the right order to watch the Star Wars movies in? I mean,
yeah.
like you should watch them all. You should learn a little bit about everything. But I think like when it comes to programming, find a project and start working on that project and see where it takes you. Like maybe it takes you down the JavaScript and PHP or PHP route. Maybe it takes you down um, you know, Java or C sharp or Swift or who knows what route. But like just start doing something. And here's the thing is that we like people on the outside look at programming languages and think of them as like, languages that we speak, right? Like uh, Italian versus English or English versus Japanese, where there's very like the crossover isn't as strong. But if you look at the fundamentals of most languages, they are based in a lot of the same logic patterns. They
Yeah.
might look a little bit different, but if you understand how object-oriented programming works in one language, a lot of that knowledge transfers over into another language. How you structure functions, how you structure loops. There's subtle differences And
The problem,
but
the problem with JavaScript, I was a Flash Action Script, and in the days when I was active programmer, Stephen, it was in the days of the different DOMs. We didn't have a library, we didn't have jQuery. We were, and that's why JavaScript died a little bit, because at my time to actually get it to work consistently on different browsers was the amount of code that you had to write. And then my only criticism of JavaScript is it's still a bit of a messy code, isn't it? It's when you look what you could write in like Python, or you could write in PHP, and then you look at the similar thing, the amount of code you got to churn out. That's why the libraries probably,
yeah.
because they help with that, don't they?
Yeah, I like libraries help with that, but you're using libraries regardless if you're using Python or PHP. Like they all have their own like library managers. Trying to reuse code is like, your best friend. I think that a language is as messy as you don't understand it. Like the less you understand a language, the less you understand programming, the more messy it gets. The more you understand it, the more organized and structured it becomes. And like
And
that's
when
the
you
thing
look at
code.
it, and the other thing is, I think the other thing we got to stress before we go for the break is learning best practices and not be a messy coder, if you know. As you get experience, when you look at other people's code and it's visually a mess, they just haven't formatted it nicely. You learn, after you've had to delve into a number of projects and take them over and looked at really messy code, you start to appreciate tidiness, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. And but like don't let that stop you. Like I've
Or
written some
are you messy, Stephen?
Here's the thing. A code that works is better than real clean code that doesn't work. Um, Coding, like it's something that you learn as you go along. The longer you code, the more clean your code is going to be. The longer you code, the more structured it is, the easier it is going to be for somebody else to read. And that's something that you can always get better. Just like with handwriting, you can always work on making your S's and your O's and your U's, a lot more tidy and neat. You can always progress in that area, but that shouldn't stop you from writing, right? That shouldn't stop you from coding just because you don't know how to do something or the best way to do it. Just do it. And then as you learn and you get more information, you'll figure out there's better ways of doing it. You can go back and rewrite it, or you can say, hey, the next project I do, I'm going to write this better, and it's going to be better than the last one. And I think that's the cool thing about coding is that a lot of it is you competing against yourself. Just like the next thing I write is going to be better than the last thing I did.
Right, we're going to go for our break. Hopefully Stephen's been impressed with my coding knowledge. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. It's been a feast about Stephen's background as a developer, plus the world of modern coding around WordPress. As we were saying in the first half, the one thing I think, if you choose PHP or JavaScript, and you probably do have to mix the both, I think that stack of technology is still you're going to be pretty safe and relevant. Where, when I was getting close to the end of my active, I still develop a bit, Stephen, but I hire people like you when I've got real projects. Is that I was pretty heavy in Ruby and Rails, and it's still there, but it's dying partly because of JavaScript, I would say. But still, I always liked Ruby and Rails for the code, the power, and just that it came from the crew of Basecamp. What more cooler can you get than that? But that's kind of there's still jobs out there, but it's not driving forward. The one of the others that's growing that surprised me, and I think it's mostly because a lot of it is driven because it's used by Google extensively, is Python, isn't it? But I don't know anything about that really, nor do I. So I think staying with PHP and JavaScript, you're kind of they would be the areas where I would incline to learn, really, where I think your effort still going to be safe, isn't it?
Yeah, but like, let's say you want to get into like AI type stuff or visual image
Yeah,
processing, like it's going to be a lot harder to make that work from a PHP
yeah.
side.
It's
A little less
Python.
hard from the JavaScript side, but Python, there's tons of libraries out there, and there's tons of stuff that's been already built around that because that language just does really good in processing that kind of information. And that's why I was saying, like, well, what do you want to build, and go follow
Yeah.
those routes. Because if you're gonna if you're gonna try to build, let's say, a web scraper or something, it's probably easier to build that in Python too. Like, there's a ton of stuff out there already that you can like look at, see how they're doing it, start editing, messing around with it. So it's
Well, you
just
say
trying to.
you are really right, because I was looking at some of the most. See, Java is still, I never touched it with a barge pole. It was too much for me, but it's still really quite popular, isn't it, Java? And I think that's because
Yeah,
of
especially when
Android.
you get to the enterprise level type of work. Like if you're dealing with really large corporations that have crazy databases, crazy structures, have to work across a lot of teams. Everything has to be really documented. And um, it it means you need a language that lends itself to that, like where people aren't just gonna quickly throw in slapstick code around and stuff like that. And Java does a much nicer job of that than, let's say, Python, which is much more, kind of roll up your sleeves, get dirty, and start hacking things together. Um, so at least that's my perception of it from what the work that I've done in it. But it's every language has its own group of people that are building things for it. And so depending on whatever project you're building, you'll probably find people talking about one language more than another type of language, or a software system, or some sort of framework. And just go with that and see where that takes you. And then you can hop on the next thing. But I can guarantee you that the things that you learn from coding in Python will help you become a better PHP coder, and will help you become a better JavaScript coder. It's not like you learn one language and all it is siloed into that language. You learn things about how computers think, how computers process, how information works, and that can be very valuable as you go into other languages. The more well-rounded you are as a programmer, I think the better code that you can produce.
When it comes to the JavaScript libraries, which three would you say that dominate at the present moment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it kind of depends what you call like libraries and what you call frameworks, and like this,
Yeah.
like the difference between those
Because
definitions. But I mean,
I suppose you could still say jQuery is quite relevant, but it's not seen in the same breath as something like React, is it?
yeah, yeah. Like I would say that, like if you're looking for like front end frameworks, like React is killing it right now. Vue is also really popular. Those are probably the two biggest ones. Um, and then I think it's interesting too, because let's say you are building a web application and you want to use React, but you also want to use PHP on the back end. Like there's a lot of people doing some really cool stuff with Laravel right now.
Yeah.
Um, and if you are in a WordPress system, let's say, and you're thinking about trying to use something else because it's just restricting you too much, you need to do more highly customized stuff. I've seen a lot of people turn like WordPress stuff into Laravel stuff, and Laravel is a really cool framework for building some pretty complex and pretty awesome web apps that I've seen out there. So that's something that I would like to dive a little bit more into. I've gotten into Laravel just a little bit more out of just curiosity,
Yeah.
and I've been really impressed with kind of what they're doing over there.
Well,
But I
that's
would
what
like
I've
to
heard. I've
spend more
heard a
time
lot
there.
of people. Yeah, sorry to talk over you. That's what I've heard. Really, a lot of people saying about Laravel. They've been really impressed with
They also
the. Yeah, go on.
They also have a fantastic training system for Laravel.
Mm,
If you ever want to learn Laravel, like go into Laracast, they have probably one of the best like courses that you can take that will take you through Laravel, and they keep it updated with the latest versions. And we'll, like, here is phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, like beginner, intermediate, advanced. Um, and then all these like kind of add-on courses that you can take around that. And just the amount of time and effort that they put into documenting and creating training material, I think has really lended itself to the success, because if you can train people to use something, you know, they'll use that, and it's pretty impressive what you can create with it.
I think that's the other thing. I think the actual training resources now, you know, there's some great free coding academies that you can join totally free. There's the resource that you've just mentioned. There's a lot of you know, it's called LinkedIn Training, formerly lynda.com. You know, Morton, my friend Morton, is one of the chief educators and trainers on that particular. So there's a lot more resources, but there's a lot more to learn as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there's always more to learn, for sure. I think one of the interesting things about WordPress is kind of understanding the constraints of it and the opportunities with it.
That's a great subject. Please explain some more.
There are a lot of things that you can tack on to WordPress and out of the box stuff that you can do. Right, you can have e-commerce. You can have, on top of the e-commerce, you can put a whole learning management system. On top of a whole learning management system, you can put a whole CRM system, and run that all from WordPress. And your marketing campaigns are coming from the same place that your e-commerce is happening, that same place that your learning management system is happening, that same place that your affiliate system is happening. And there's a lot of beauty in that, but there's also a lot of headache in that and a lot of frustration in that. Because once you get a lot of code that has to work together, all of a sudden, if one thing kind of goes a little bit sideways, everything goes a little bit sideways.
Wow, you need a good support company, don't you?
Yeah, you need a good support company like Jonathan's.
So that's what we preach. We provide all the tools, but we also provide the support.
So that's an important thing to know. And then the ability for you to fix the problem is sometimes limited, because if that problem is something deep ingrained in that plugin, then it's really like either that plugin author has to fix it, or you have to like fork the plugin and know how to code and figure out what's going wrong and dissect the whole plugin and change it yourself. And that can be a very frustrating and time-intensive experiment. And I kind of have developed this theory for how to think through whether you should code it yourself or whether you should just get plugins. So I'm going to float this out, and I'd love to get your reaction.
Well, actually, shall we leave this for our bonus content?
Oh,
I think
sure.
I think that would be a good cut-off. We're getting around about 27, 28 minutes into this. So I think we're cut off. And if you want to hear Stephen's views about when it's a good idea to hand code or use a plugin, go to the WP-Tonic YouTube channel and watch this whole discussion. I've really enjoyed it, Stephen.
I've never said this publicly before, so this will be like the first time on air that Stephen Sauter has ever made this statement. So,
well, the drum beats roll. So, Stephen, what's the best way for people to find out more about you and Zipfish?
Yeah, head over to zipfish.io, run a speed test, see how much faster you can make your WordPress site.
And they've helped with the WP-Tonic website. It's on Kinsta, but there's also a lot of legacy codes, different plugins. It's a bit of a monster, the WP-Tonic website. I don't know how many pages or posts. It's been going since late 2014. So as a site grows out, it just becomes a bit of a heap of different database entries and that. So Stephen and his team came in and they helped out and gave it a bit of a rejuvenation, a bit of a speed push. There's a bit of a speed push, and it really helped. Thanks, Stephen. We'll be back next week, hopefully, with another great guest. I've got a webinar this Friday, but you probably will hear this show after that. But we're going to have a webinar in April, or we're going to rename it. Webinar's a little bit old-fashioned now, so me and Spencer are going to rename our live event on a new platform as well. Well, I'll give you more information about that as it comes around. Like I say, if you want to hear Stephen's views about coding, hand coding, or plugin, go to the WP-Tonic YouTube channel. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye. The drums roll, Stephen. So, what are your views on this particular subject then, Steve?
All right, here's my hot take. Simply put, you can go 2 layers up from core WordPress. Any higher, you have problems. All right, so let's talk about what I mean by that. So you have core WordPress, right? So it's like your basic flat WordPress installation. Now let's say you put WooCommerce on top of that. That's 1 layer. Now you have Elementor, okay? And so you have WordPress, WooCommerce, and then Elementor displaying data from WooCommerce. That's probably going to function fairly well. You rarely run into issues. If there are issues, they get resolved extraordinarily fast. Where you end up hitting problems is then when you go 1 layer past that and then install, let's say, like jet engines, Croco blocks, or a third-party plugin on top of that that's now interacting with Elementor. And that is where your stack can go just a little bit sideways, because
that's what it is diplomatically.
you're 3 levels up from WordPress core. 3 levels up is where problems happen, because those plugins are dealing with like changes in Elementor, changes in WooCommerce, changes in WordPress core, and trying to deal with those 3. I have seen even the best developers just struggle with keeping their plugin stable, and they're always seeming to be having to be like very responsive to changes that other companies are making. Another example of this, let's say you have WordPress core, WooCommerce, a learning management system, and then you add in Elementor. Now you're 3 levels up again, and that's where it starts getting like dangerous, because your WooCommerce is powering the payment stuff for your LMS. Your LMS stuff is powering all the learning management stuff, and then you have Elementor trying to display content based on all of those things, and you have just like crossed the edge of the threshold. Now it depends on how quality your plugins are, right? So if you are using WooCommerce, your element system is LearnDash, and you're using Elementor, those are like really like household names. They're tried and true plugins. You'll run into less problems than if you're using like some rando off the wall plugin, but it's still, when you hit that 3rd level is when things start getting a little complex, and you'll start having to like really be careful about how you update your plugins. Like, are you updating your plugins in staging? Are you checking everything, making sure your checkout isn't broken? You have to do that sort of stuff once you start getting 3 levels high. If you're less than 3 levels high, I rarely see any problems when you are just updating things on the live server. Things just become like a lot simpler, and I've just seen like an incredible amount of stability there.
So what you're saying is, I call it avoiding the Frankenstein. These, and we do have a stack, like we've got Fluent CRM, we've got WooCommerce, we've got launch flows, and we've got Elementor plus Lifter or LearnDash in our stack. But we found that we keep our stack tight, and we don't allow our clients. We will install other third-party plugins if they insist, and we tell them we just do a quick security check. But if they start causing instability, we will sort out the first couple problems. But if it consistently causes problem, we're going to ask you to remove that particular plugin, or we're going to remove it, because we don't provide support for every Tom, Dick and Harry plugin that somebody wants to put on there, because it gets to the situation that you've just so well outlined. You get unstable stack, don't you?
Yeah. And I want to clarify, like, I'm not saying don't do that, right? Like if you're building out a product and it's your first go of it and you want to, let's put in all these features, let's see what people use, let's get user feedback and stuff. Like it's going to be faster to put in all those plugins and run a site that is maybe a little Frankenstein, but at least you start you everything's built faster, it's built cheaper, it allows you to iterate on your idea, it allows you to make changes without having to actually get into the code. But once you figure out your product, and your product has been around a while, I think it's advantageous to start thinking about how do I start stepping backwards and start taking out some of these plugins and utilizing my own custom code to handle these sort of scenarios. Like maybe at some point it's better not to use Elementor and build your own thing because you already know what your site looks like. You know what the features need to be. There's a stability in it all, right? The idea of adding a form really quickly is not something that has to happen anymore because you already have all your forms and you already have landing pages. You know the variants. And so you can go and build a theme that supports just that. And then you could take something out of your stack and you would see it increase stability inside of your WordPress system for doing that.
Funny enough, that's one of the things we've done on the WP-Tonic pages that I'm now happy with, to actually get a page that you're really happy with. And, and then if we're talking about a site that's actually getting reasonable traffic, so then you go on to the next stage, which is conversion level. And then you sort out that, it seems to be converting to a level that you're reasonably happy with, because you can never be happy. But then when you get to that stage, we normally ditch, I get my developer to use custom, the Australian, my mind's gone, active custom fields.
ACF?
Yeah.
Advanced Custom Fields?
And I get it hand coded, and then I use that product to give me a back end interface. And that, do that after I'm happy with everything. Everything looks reasonably the way I want it. We're not going to be, because it's a lot of hard work, keep changing everything, because you've got to make sure it's mobile friendly, it's got to be checked properly. People have when you're starting, a page builder really helps because it helps with rapid development. But I would agree with Stephen, when you get to a certain stage, it's probably be best to look at getting that hand coded, because it doesn't matter if it's Gutenberg or Elementor. Having something that's hand coded will always be quicker than some page builder, won't it?
Yeah, because it only has what you need. It doesn't have all the extra stuff that you're not using, that you don't need, and it's tailored exactly for your exact business case, versus having where like a plugin has to think of 1,000 business cases and the various different variants and needs for all those different ones.
Now, to finish off, there's been a lot of conversation. Elementor in some ways haven't helped themselves, because there's been some rapid, but it is traditionally on a charge. I think I sense through what its management have publicly stated recently that they are modifying their position about charging forward at quite such a pace, and recognizing that it might have damaged the brand a little bit. So they're going to be testing and making sure their major releases are a bit more stable. But a lot of people have been hitting Elementor and all kind of third-party page builders like Beaver Builder, Oxygen. There's a number of them, isn't it? Saying that they will never be as fast as Gutenberg. But I think Gutenberg has some speed problems as well. So do you think it's just different people with different loyalty to different tribes? And none of these will be as fast as a hand-coded, optimized page?
I think it's a lot of people doing different things on different servers. There's just so many variables when it comes to like page speed. Um, you could build an Elementor site that's really fast. You could build a Beaver Builder site that's really fast. You could build um, a Gutenberg site that's really fast. You could also pretty easily build a Gutenberg site that's incredibly slow, and very easily build an Elementor site that's incredibly slow. Some of these things like lend themselves better to speed, but the issue is that everybody has their own unique cases, and some people want, cool animations and some really complex user interaction stuff going on, and that's going to take longer to load. And where's your server? And are you using Fastly as your CDN? Are you using Bunny CDN? Are you using Cloudflare CDN? All of those things like matter. And so when somebody says this is faster, this is slower, unless they have like actual like benchmark, like this is the server, this is how things were routed through the DNS, this is our CDN system, this is exactly the page that we set up. If they don't have that documented, then it's just like their opinion. It's not founded in science at all.
It's propaganda. I'm not going to name the actual hosting provider, but there's a hosting provider that really sells themselves on speed, and I've got to be careful because I don't want the viewers to be able to identify the company by what I'm saying, but they offer, their main selling point is that we can install this WordPress website and it's ready to go, and it's blindingly quick. Well, and you can sign up for free, and when you look in the back end, they've got free plugins activated, right? Well, of course it's going to be blinding, but I tell you, on the on a lot of client sites, if you can get a fully functioning client site apart from the most basic small business website, most websites, if you can get below 40 plugins, you're doing quite good. Anything more complicated, like the WP-Tonic site, I think we got over 90 plugins installed on it. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but when you talk to anybody, Vito said on his website he had almost over 100 plugins activated. It's really easy to get into the 60, 70 mark. Well, like I say, but this particular, they're pushing speed, but when you look at it, it's got free plugins. It's not real world, is it, Stephen? That's just a fantasy world, isn't it?
Yeah. You can make any site fast if you strip it down to its bare bones. I'll just put it that way.
But it's not the reality. But on the other hand, there are people should just not. There are active things you can do with WordPress, like you say, with a good CDN, a good server net, a good server base. On the WP-Tonic Touch Wood, it's a pretty stable. When we're updating plugins, and we don't normally get the occasional conflict and problem, but it's rare now. It seems, I don't add anything new to the stack. And if it is, it's well tested. But on the other hand, there has to be a price in a way for paying for all these great plugins, because if you like you were saying when you were working in the SaaS world, to build a site with all this custom functionality, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, aren't you? And a lot of time. So you're getting all that benefit of those plugins and all that pre-developed technology. You just got to be aware that there has to be some kind of price for all that, and that's stability and maybe speed. But if you just utilize some common sense, you can, and not go for the cheapest all the time, and understand, which I hope this podcast in general, and the Friday show does, it kind of educates the listener and viewer. Well, that's enough waffling from me, isn't it, Stephen? So I think we better wrap it up. Stephen's got things to do. Stephen, what's the best way for listeners and viewers in getting hold of you?
Yeah, just head over to zipfish.io and run a speed test.
And I'll say goodbye to you, folks, and we'll see you next week with another great interview show or internal discussion between me and Stephen. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye.
Bye.